Ms. Brenda Lett, Ms. Eva Castillo, and my new friend, Ted. I'm Sarah Jane Knoy, and I lived in Chicago for many years, more than 20 years, and was a community organizer in Chicago. And I'm currently the director of the Granite State Organizing Project, and I am the facilitator of this panel. And I think we want to talk about two things. First of all, just allow the emotion that the movie elicits in us. Just take a deep breath and allow that. We want to talk about, from those who were in Chicago, what does this bring up for us? And we also wanted to talk about who is doing multiracial, multi-ethnic organizing today. Is there a Rainbow Coalition today? And if not, why not? And how could it happen? We also want to talk about whatever these panelists want to talk about, because really, they know what they want to say. I was a child when Fred Hampton was killed, and I remember it very well. And I remember knowing he was killed by the police. I remember my parents taking me to a Black Panther rally in Massachusetts about dealing with the murder of Fred Hampton. And then, 30 years later, I was an organizer in Uptown, the white community that they were talking about there. By the time I got there, it was not predominantly white. It was very diverse. It was 1/3 white, 1/3 African American, 1/3 Latinx people, and another 10% Asian immigrants and refugees. And there were echoes. There were some echoes that still reverberated through that community of this cross-racial organizing that had happened. And there was still some people who had come from the South with black lung who remembered those days. And I regret to tell you that by now it is probably, that community is about 80% gentrified. We fought for 30 years, 20 years. We won for a long time, held it at bay, but it is now pretty much under the Mayor Daley's son. Pretty much became resegregated, white, wealthy community. So this movie brings up a lot for me. And why are we still dealing with the same issues?
You come backwards.
Yeah. So, but that said, I want to turn first to Brenda, who is really our most important speaker on this panel.
No.
Just say what
She's saying that because I was born in Chicago.
Right. So what does the movie bring up for you? What do you want to say?
Similar to you, I was young when Fred Hampton and Mark Clark were killed. But also inside that house was Bobby Rush, a brother named Harold Bell, who I did get a chance to meet them later on. So for me, I think it just brings up the, the importance of revolution, which is change. And change in this country would be for us to figure out that we're all human and that we all have a right to this so-called American dream of liberty, and freedom that seems to be just given to a few.
Were you involved in the Washington campaign and the Washington Coalition?
I was, Sarah Jane.
Tell us about that.
Well, I worked for an organization called the Chicago Black United Communities, which was called CBUC, and we did some of the early on organizing. We had a slogan called "We Shall See in '83," and so we worked really hard to elect Harold Washington. He told us that he needed about 100,000 people to register to vote before he would even consider running, and I think we did something like 300,000 people or something like that. So we did way more than what he wanted. And then a gentleman named Ed Gardner, which was, I think, Soft Sheen. He was a man of African descent, and he helped bankroll the Harold Washington election. So right after that happened, Sarah Jane, the organizers kind of faded back, and the powers that be took it over. Very similar to Obama, meaning like once people realized it was going to happen, the people who did the groundwork kind of faded back, and the people with all the money kind of took over. And that's what happened with Harold Washington.
And I don't know if people who weren't in Chicago know that for his whole first term, the city council refused to do anything to pass any of his initiatives. And as Brenda said, then we saw that with President Obama. The whole government refused to follow their own laws because there was a man of African descent in the driver's chair.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah, I was having flashbacks when Obama was first elected to what it was like in Chicago when Mayor Harold was first elected.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I understand, Ted, that you were involved with the Black Panthers and you're kind of a historian on some of this stuff.
I guess, yes, on both counts.
Okay.
I dropped out of college on the East Coast and was living in San Francisco. My late first wife was African American, and I was raising a black family. I was working for, at the time, as a circulation manager for the black community newspaper in San Francisco, the Sun Reporter. And after the FBI blew up the printing press that had been printing the Panther paper, here's, by the way, here's a copy of this. I brought a few relics along, some other papers from around the nation, but I then helped do distribution for the Black Panther Party newspaper. And you know, I could, with my white privilege, I could go down to a different printing press in Palo Alto. I could drive the truck to the airport in Oakland. The cops are already all over the San Francisco area because we were trying to get papers to the East Coast. So, man, part of what this film reminds me of is how directly relevant what the Black Panther Party was talking about then is right now today. I mean, you saw some of the 10 points of the famous Panthers 10-point program, and you can read through it. I copied it over. It's a little easier to read, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing. It's so simple and straightforward. You know, we want freedom. We want the power to determine the destiny of our black community. I really like number 10. It kind of synthesizes them all. We want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace. And you could hear African American activists say the same things today. And the cops are doing the same things today. I was not directly targeted by COINTELPRO, but I was arrested by the FBI several times. I filed a Freedom of Information Act request in the mid-'80s just to see what kind of information they had and what was really going on. I was still, at the time, considered a person of interest in a then unsolved murder in Berkeley, California. And they said that I must be guilty because somebody had said that the trigger man was black and the driver was white, the wheelman was white. And so, since I was already known to consort with Negroes, as it says in my FBI record, therefore I must be guilty. So that has stayed with me for a very, very long time. And I'm here to say absolutely 100% the FBI sponsored death squads in this country for years. They absolutely put out a hit on Fred Hampton because he was such, in their mind, such a threat. He was articulate. He was building coalitions. He scared the bejesus out of them.
And he was so young. He was so
Yeah, he
young.
was.
I know. Yeah. So I wanted Eva, I don't know if she wants to do this, but I wanted her to address,
I
like,
watch it on TV.
yeah, I wanted her to address sort of who do you see in the country now trying to build
I see
rainbow
Reverend Barber.
coalitions? Yeah.
I see Reverend Barber talking, you know, I hear all of this, it's like listening to the Poor People's Campaign all over again. And it reminds me of Faith in Action, how Faith in Action is a national network of interfaith that GSOP is part of. And they try to get us to work together, because they have the black churches that work on mass incarceration and on the criminal justice system, and then they have us, the brown people, working on immigration, and they say, you're all f***ed up anyways, so why don't you just work together? So they make us work cross-sectionally. So until we learn to work solidarity with one another, we're not gonna go anywhere.
Yeah.
That's true.
Fred Hampton's use of solidarity really struck me.
Yes.
Because now we're talking about the Immigrant Solidarity Network, working
yeah.
in solidarity with black and brown brothers and sisters. What do you think, Brenda? Do you think anybody's really trying to do that kind of work?
I think it's very difficult work, and one of the things that makes it difficult is our challenge with particularly people of African descent and not seeing them as human beings. So I think it's real difficult because when you can't even talk about, you don't see them as such, then you really can't get to the work. So one of the challenges that I deal with on a daily basis is this whole concept that people see me as something called black, and I'm not. So to me, that's one of our fundamental issues, one of the things that keeps dividing us.
And I can't help but notice who got killed. It wasn't the White Patriots or
That's right.
even the Young Lords,
That's
right?
right.
And we were talking about that earlier, like somebody gets killed when real people power starts to come together.
Yeah.
And-
Well, that's true. I mean, if you think about John Brown, though, I think he got killed.
Yeah, he did.
But the thing is, particularly in the European community, we know that Europeans such as Ted has been working very hard to treat everybody like human beings, but they don't really get a lot of notoriety for that. As a matter of fact, they get scorned. Or in the case of John Brown, they actually called him a crazy man. So though, to me, that's the fundamental work that we have to do, is really just see each other as human beings. And it's difficult because because we describe people as being white, and we all know that, and we all know they're not. And we describe people as being black,
Or browns or
and we know they're not. So it's, and we use those words not to just to describe.
No, that's part of who
We use it to define.
define, yeah.
Yeah. And so this whole concept of white is purity, good, and everything like that. And this concept of black is bad, bad, bad. So how are we going to fix it if we continue to, use those words
But that's
to
why
describe people?
I refuse to answer the race question in any paper that I fill out. When they put race, I put human. Period. And I always fill it up. And my friends are all data crazy people. Oh, but this is defeating the purpose. I say, I don't give a shit. If we are fighting for equity, and you yourselves, like in this last conference there, I told Melina, did you fill out the application? Yes, but I put in race, I put human, and age, I put older than you. Oh my God, you're crazy. I said, well, why do we need to fill out the race question in every single piece of paper that we fill?
Yeah.
Even us that were fighting against it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have a question. Did you know, Eva, about the Young Lords before you saw that movie? Did you know?
Yes,
about that
because I
history?
was always a rebel at home, and I was fascinated by watching all the fights here, and it was so inspirational to me. And this is the country that I wanted to come and live because of that.
Okay.
So as a little kid, I wanted to come and live here and fight for human rights.
So, but what do you think about the fight? I mean, when you look at somebody like a Bobby Rush, who is part of the system now, because he's a congressman, Reverend Jesse Jackson, who's also part of the system. So how do we work within the system and still figure out how to not overturn it, but make it be what it says it's supposed to be?
I don't think the systems are fixable. I think we have to destroy them and rebuild them. We cannot really make anything for work equally within the present systems the way they are. The present systems are designed for and by just the majority, white privilege, period, that's it. And I don't think we can really do anything. And you see the well-meaning people that work with within those systems, sooner or later they have to conform to the systems or they're out.
So what does the other
Yeah,
people think?
yeah.
Yeah,
What do people who watch the movie think? What do you want to talk about? What did the movie bring up for you? What do you think about Brenda's question?
Yeah, what do you think?
Sometimes it's good, well, I'm one of the revolutionaries, but I try to work within the system, and I'm okay with it being out. If you push too hard, I'll just say it. I currently work at NHTI, the community college, doing fundraising and development work for them, but my background is in community organizing. And I'm currently, and I know it's funny to hear it, I'm the co-advisor to the Black Student Union on campus, which is a new organization. And it's interesting because I use, and Jenny, you can't record this for the public, but I use my white privilege to be able to push where the other co-advisor who isn't can't.
Well, Jimmy, we know she does that.
Yeah.
Whether you record it or not. I mean, we know that you do
No, they
that.
certainly know they do. I do that.
Well, yeah, because you have that all the time, whether you use it or not.
So being able to use that for them, but the film made me want to push more. I tried to get some of the students to come tonight, but they're in school and they have other things and priorities.
Absolutely.
I do agree it's tough to make change within the system because it is structured to benefit those who created it.
Yes.
And even when you make small changes, there's always that stopgap. It's really tough to make change, but it's also tough to take down the whole system and start over. Because even people that support it,
Right.
change, go, wait, we don't know what it's gonna be. We'd rather stay within the broken system than something that maybe that's totally unknown. But I do appreciate all the work that I know you guys all do out in the community.
Was there anything you didn't know in the movie? Anything brand new or?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. I grew up outside of Chicago until 5th grade. I grew up in Skokie. And I still have family that lives in Chicago, so you never hear the whole history in school or anything like that. It's stuff like this, and even this probably is the whole history and the whole truth.
What other folks? What are you thinking?
Well, I'm just kind of a stream of conscious kind of person, so I hope you can bear with me. Just, all sorts of things. I mean, just it really made me emote a bit to see the coalition that they formed. That they really saw how they all had the same challenges and how collectively they could make a difference. And yet, even in this day, a lot of people don't join the union when they could join a union. And, we've become so ingrained in our individualism that we can't seem to recognize how we are all in this together. I thought it was really interesting about the Confederate flag. That was amazing that the brothers, if I may use that term, tried to find space for that.
Yeah.
I can't even hardly